Welcome to the Disabled Podcast, starring your host, Christian Reitz.
Hot dog, let's go!
Welcome to the Disabled Podcast, the show that incorporates disabilities with the magic of Disney. Welcome to episode number 3, entitled My Disney Experience Tips and Tricks, Part 2. Be sure to use our hashtag the Disabled Podcast when sharing this podcast to all social media platforms. Again, that's hashtag the Disabled Podcast when sharing this podcast to all social media platforms. And now, here is your host, Christian Reitz. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode 3 of the Disabled Podcast. So before we begin this episode, I just want to give a very special shout out to the Quayle family for being avid listeners of this podcast. So guys, thank you so much for listening. You guys' support means so much. They're actually friends of mine. So again, thank you so much for your support. Now, before we get into today's episode, let me just kind of preface what today's episode is going to be about. We're going to talk today about Genie Plus. We're going to talk about My Disney Experience. We're even going to talk about lightning lanes. So here we go. Let's dive in to episode 3 of the Disabled Podcast. Alright guys, so what you're seeing right now on your screen, if you're watching on YouTube, is you're actually seeing my phone screen. Now, this is the first tip I have in this second part of this little kind of, we'll call it a mini-series, is you want to download this app right here that you're seeing on your screen. Now, for those of you that are on Spotify or you're on Apple Podcasts, you want to make sure that you download the My Disney World Experience or the My Disney Experience app for Apple and for Android. Now, once that's downloaded, you're going to want to click on the app, and let me show you what this app's going to do. Now, I honestly am not logged into anything right now, but I'll just show you around a little bit of what you can, of how you can use the app. So here on the app, you'll notice it says My Tickets and Passes. That's where you can actually, well, let me back up and say this. What it used to do is you used to get the park maps. Well, now this is your park map, your lightning lanes, your wait times, how you order food, how you check out merchandise, and how you make plans and check on your reservations, all in one. So on the top left right here, you're going to see the words My Tickets and Passes. And that's where you're going to get on your My Disney Experience account. You're going to log into your account with your email and password that you have set up with Disney already. And you can link everything from your tickets, your magic bands, which we'll talk about magic bands in a future episode, probably in the next episode of the Disabled Podcast, as well as you can reserve dining. Now, reserve dining is where you can go to online, and you can do it online in advance, sometimes 60 days in advance, sometimes 180 days in advance, and that's really depending on how far in advance you book your trip or whether or not you're an annual pass holder. On the right-hand side, right here on this bottom right, you can see where it says to order food. And that's for anything like mobile ordering, which we will, again, talk about mobile ordering in another episode of the Disabled Podcast. And, of course, you can check out merchandise. If you see something in the park and you want to buy it, you can look it up and you can check it out right there online. Now, on the bottom here, you can do stuff like the virtual queue, which for that would be stuff for the ride Tron up in Magic Kingdom. So that's something you can do, and we'll talk about that here in just one moment. You can also look at your future plans for the upcoming days of your trip, so you can plan and rearrange your trip if you need to. You can look at the current plans of the day that you're on when you get to the Walt Disney World Resort, so you can kind of see what there is available. And you can also look at your hotel reservations. Now at the bottom is all about PhotoPass, so your PhotoPass gallery, your PhotoPass lenses, and your memory maker. Again, we're going to do another episode on all of this. I'm just showing you basically the app. And of course, you can always plan your next visit with park reservations, park info. You can always do a car locator, and you can always figure out about the best transportation and parking situations for everything else. You can even link your account, your magic bands like I told you earlier, or set up magic mobile entry. Again, all of these things that I'm saying are basically things we're going to talk about in the next episode. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click on this icon right here, and we're going to go to Google Maps. Now, you want to make sure your Google Maps is enabled. So you want to keep enabling your Google Maps. And your wait times. Now, these are your wait times for every park. So, let's say I want to filter out, let's say I'm going to Magic Kingdom. Boom. I'll select Magic Kingdom, hit apply, and then boom, all your wait times are right there. Now there's different numbers here for the different attractions. All these numbers are basically the wait times for all these different rides. Now, if you don't want to look at this in what is called the park map view, you can always go up here to the top right-hand corner of the wait times, where it says wait times, top right where it says show list, and boom, you can see anything from 5-minute standbys, which if you're a Disney expert, you know basically that's a walk-on. So anything from Dumbo, the Flying Elephant, all the way to Hall of Presidents, meeting the princesses, the Barnstormer, meeting Mickey Mouse, the Astro Orbiter, Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin, which is one of my favorite rides, Jungle Cruise, and even Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. So every day these wait times will change, and obviously depending on certain things, like certain times of the year, like spring break that we're currently in this year at the time of this recording, these times can fluctuate every day. So again, that's just something very simple you can do. Yeah, and so basically that's a little bit of the My Disney Experience app. You can also check on showtimes, and you can request access with a virtual queue. And also, what we're getting ready to talk about is the lightning lane. So let's go ahead and let's talk about the lightning lane. So now you're probably wondering, what the heck is a lightning lane? I've never heard of that before. Well, let me take you back to pre-COVID, pre-2020. There was this thing called Fast Pass. Anybody remember Fast Passes? Let's have a moment of silence for Fast Passes. Okay, so anyway, I thought that was funny, okay? But anyways, lightning lanes. So the difference between a lightning lane and there's another thing called Genie Plus. So let's go through the differences of what Genie Plus and lightning lanes are. Now, starting with the individual lightning lane. Now this is a per attraction, per person fee. And basically it does kind of the same thing that Fast Pass used to do, where it would schedule you a return time to use the faster lane, almost like the Fast Pass lane. And you would be at the 1 or 2 top attractions in each park. And this was actually excluded from Genie Plus, but the alternative was obviously waiting in a slower line, like the standby line. Now that was a paid thing, and obviously now, so back in the day, I should say, let me go and start this part and say that back in the day it was actually free. Fast passes were free, and they you could do like 3 per day or something like that. It's been a while since I've done fast passes, so I don't remember all of it, but you can look up what fast passes were if you don't know. But fast passes basically were like you get 3 per day, and it cost nothing. It actually came with your trip, so you can get 3 individual fast passes per day. It was awesome. It was a way to get to the front of the line of your favorite attraction. Now, Lightning Lane and Genie Plus are a little bit different because they are both paid. So like I said, I just explained Lightning Lane to you, and basically how it's a per person, per attraction fee. Now, Genie Plus is a paid app-based ride reservation system. Now, this actually allows you to make a one-at-a-time reservation for most attractions. So, like when your return time comes, you get to skip the standby line and use the faster Lightning Lane queue to board with the lower wait time. Now, the differences between the individual Lightning Lane and the Genie Plus the Genie Plus system are in some ways a difference between costs. Now, when you talk about the individual Lightning Lane, the prices vary by attraction and also by the day of the year. It's usually around spring break or Christmas break or whatever. Now, this can range anywhere from $10 to $25 per person per ride. And there are obviously many attractions that cost a couple more dollars, but they're still within that range on the weekends versus the midweeks. So you don't need to purchase Genie Plus in order to have an individual Lightning Lane. Now, for the Genie Plus experience, it's a little bit different. This is for a fixed daily price. So what Genie Plus is going to do is going to give you the next available access to Lightning Lane queues at many attractions one at a time. Now, this daily range can cost you anywhere from $23 to $39 per person. Taxes, obviously, is obviously included within that. Now, there's a lot of controversy within both of these things. It's saying, like, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? Well, let's just say it really depends. If you're going to places like Magic Kingdom or Hollywood Studios and Animal Kingdom, people do recommend that you use it in conjunction with a touring plan. For the individual lightning lane, it really does depend on how long the standby lines are. So, and really, also, I'll mention this too, it also depends on how large your party size is. Now, passes are sold for the individual lightning lane per person, and guests are limited to 2 purchases per day. So if you schedule with a touring plan, it may not be necessary. So just make sure, again, it's really up to you and what you're willing to pay for and the experience you want to have. So that's something that you really, really want to keep in mind when planning your trip. Well, guys, there you have it. There's just 3 more tips to help make your Walt Disney World experience as magical as it can be. We talked about Genie Plus, we talked about the My Disney Experience app, we even talked about Lightning Lane. Now, we're going to talk about virtual queues in a future episode of the Disabled Podcast, probably in the next one. So, in the next one, we are actually going to talk about virtual queues. So I'll explain a little bit more about what that is in a future episode, again, in the next episode of the Disabled Podcast. If you have any further questions, you can obviously go online, go to the Disney website, and they will answer your questions further. Or if I could be of any assistance to you, please message me on the brand new Disabled Podcast Facebook page. That's the capital D, capital I, capital S, Abled Podcast Facebook page. You guys, thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of the Disabled Podcast. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and we'll see ya
Real soon.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Disabled Podcast. Don't forget to use the hashtag the Disabled Podcast when sharing this podcast to all of your social media platforms. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and we'll see ya real soon.